thousands of people that die every year from dysfunction. And drug and alcohol, over 100,000. But what about the mental health, the suicide, the eating disorder, everything, the destruction that this thing, dysfunction, creates? And yet we as a people, we minimize it, we downplay it, we negotiate over it, we're afraid of it. And it's like, really? It's like we are in battle, and it's all masqueraded as the enemy. You know, all of that is like the foothold the enemy has on all of us. And so, you know, as believers, we're called to be warriors on this side of heaven.
Hey man, you want to talk about God? Well, Scott and Jenny Graham, you guys have actually been here all weekend.
It's been a blast.
At my house.
Yeah.
And we've done a whole bunch of things. And I have really, really enjoyed getting to know you guys more, spending some time with you guys, and figuring some things out. And now you're here on the podcast. Corey, anything you want to say to get us started?
Yeah, I felt like I was late to the party just because you guys have been kind of chilling for the last couple days. And then after like 30 minutes.
Right.
Which, I mean, I feel...
You're caught up.
I'm
right?
good.
Yeah.
I'm real good.
Well, I think that it's going to be fun because I have heard two versions now of the story that we want to talk to you guys about. The first version I heard on a golf course the day that I met Scott. Right. We played golf, and Scott's a much better golfer than I am. But we're working on it. We're working on it, right? And then was able to meet Jenny, and it was amazing. And then I got to hear another version of the story yesterday. So I'm fresh on it, right?
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about some questions I want to ask, some details I want to dive into.
Ooh.
Right?
Okay.
So if you guys would, and they own a ministry, a company, a business, whatever you want to call it. Which one would you categorize it as?
It's a front for a ministry. It's definitely a business, but it's the CEO is Lord Jesus.
I love that. Called Confrontations. And before we get too much into exactly what Confrontations does, I want to get to the story.
Okay.
So if one of you guys wants to take it off. Jenny's
taking
taking
the
it
wheel on this one.
Jenny's taking it.
Take the
So
wheel.
Scott and I met and married in less than 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's how we start off with a bang.
Yeah, take it to the bank.
And so he always says, I'm the one, meaning Jenny, I'm the one who took the risk. And for him, it was a no-brainer. But the thing of it is, I mean, that seems really irrational. But because of my faith and my seriousness around wanting to not run my life, because I ran my life for 23 years, and I didn't do all that I wanted to do. I did lots that I regret. And so when I turned my life over to the Lord at 23, it was like, okay, I get it. You're not here like in a genie bottle for when I'm in a predicament, right? I'm here for whatever you want. And that was such an epiphany at 23.
What led to that epiphany?
What led to that epiphany?
Yeah.
Just in a work setting. And so I know the stats are that, once you get a certain age, there's not the conversion rates that you see in kids for leading kids to Jesus. But I'm saying adults are ripe. And especially in the world we live in now, gosh, I think they're even more ripe because I think there's more internal turmoil than there has ever been at any time that I've been on the earth. Yeah. So just in a work setting, maybe a dozen people worked there, and it was a little financial services office. They all, unbeknownst to me, all of them literally were praying for me and invited me to a Bible study and just kind of blew me away one morning. And then that very next day, so that was a Saturday morning, the next day I was in church, and then I was like off to the races. Like the first thing I did was I put my TV in the closet because if there was a national emergency, I wanted to be able to find out what Red Cross to go to.
Smart.
Right?
Okay.
Because like what cot do I sleep on? Where do I get some water? And but I wanted to remove all the distractions that I'd had for 23 years.
And just in case anyone was wondering, this was in like
Yes, context.
2003, 2004, right before smartphones came out. That's why she had to keep the TV for the Red Cross centers.
Well, there was no
Smartphones
such
didn't
thing as a
exist.
smart TV in 1983.
Right.
In
I was wondering
1983.
what's the
It was
context there
40
for like
it was
that. Yeah.
the context. It was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Jenny, in my head, you're not a day over 29.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll leave my age to your imagination, right where it's at. So the bottom line is that at the age of 23, without those distractions, I would literally like lay on the carpet with my ear. And I really wasn't trying to listen in to the people in the apartment below. No, it was that I had seen in the old Western movies how the Indians would lay on the ground and they'd be listening. You know, when was the cavalry coming? When was the opposition coming? And so I just wanted to take a posture of being on my face or being on my side to see how, if I could still my heart and hear what his plan was. And so from 23 until the day I met him, just shy of 28, I was getting these like little tidbits. And I kept writing them down and I was building a vision board. And so by the time I met him, met and married in less than 3 weeks, I'll tell you what, I'm going on 4 years. It's like, Lord, are you on time here? Is where that was at. So I knew I would marry a man, or I knew that the Lord, I felt confident that the Lord was telling me, I'm going to marry a short, stocky, brunette man with green eyes and more freckles than me. Not so that we could play dot to dot, just so that I wouldn't feel conscious about my own freckles,
Right.
Wow.
which I'd been relentlessly teased for as a child. So I'm grown up in Los Angeles and it's 85 out and I'm in long sleeves hiding my freckles, right? So deep things, right? But these were the things that made it easy to spot him and prepare me for the bomb he dropped 24 hours after we met.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we met in a hot swinging spot. If you know Los Angeles, there's a place that the surfers go to. It's 15 minutes from Malibu Beach, famous beach. It's where the bikers go because, you know, the canyons and great places to ride your ride. And it's called the Sagebrush Cantina. And on a Sunday afternoon, that place is just filled with a couple hundred people, live music, lots of guacamole, probably pictures of margaritas flowing like fountains.
Right.
Really cool spot. Everyone in LA knows about it practically. And I walked in there at noon on Mother's Day all those years ago. And the only table in the whole place, of, you know, bigger than your backyard, like a big space, the only table that opened up was the one next to the hottest guy in the whole place.
Wow.
It was so awesome. Oh my gosh. I could just like, my heart stopped for a second. It skipped a beat. And I actually saw him at the check-in spot where they make you show your ID,
Right.
right? Because who looks
Right.
that old? And I almost dropped my purse. And in that visceral reaction, I was like, there it is. My dream come true.
I just want to stop you for a second and let the listeners know, let the viewers know that you're listening to this story. And it's this amazing story of Jenny's past, right? What happened. And now she's talking about the first time she saw Scott. And I want you to just really tune in because I know the rest of the story around this, right? What happened before it and what happened after it. And I'm telling you, like, this part of the story is amazing. What you're going to hear in a minute is going to blow your mind, particularly what Scott's occupation was at this current moment in time. Jenny, please continue.
All right. So there I am in that moment, wanting this guy to hurry up and finish checking my ID because it looks like the only table is the table that I am destined for.
That's such a real feeling,
right?
When you're like, I want that spot.
The bar scene. What can I say? At least this was an outdoor patio, right? It wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't. Yeah. So here it's just me and my girlfriend. And it just appears like it's him and a guy friend. And so I am literally almost toppling over tables, almost knocking people over.
Running.
I mean, I have never gone so fast in my 4-inch Halston high heels, right? And in my little jean mini skirt. Like, I remember the day, and I'm making that beeline, and we beat the other two females that were making a beeline from a different entrance. Same kind of situation. I think they had the same thought of, I like that landscape. I like that view.
Ooh, that landscape.
So, yeah. So bottom line, we're sitting there, and within minutes, he gets up. Because I sat with my back to him.
Right.
I have class.
Right.
I knew I'd stare at him
Right.
if I was facing him.
Right.
So I sat with my back to him and just had Karen tell me everything that was going on. Okay, tell me this, tell me that.
He's looking over his shoulder,
Right.
checking you out.
And she's just, giving me the story. We're figuring it out. And Scott pops up because he recognizes someone. And so now I have a full, 20,
Right.
almost 30 minutes to study him. And I'm watching him interacting with a female.
Staring.
And I'm loving it because he's not picking up on her. He's not
Wow.
flirting with her. Now, I'm knowing that that's because either they've known each other since kindergarten,
Right.
or she's the old next door neighbor.
Uh-huh.
Like there's a reason
Right.
why, because we're in a hot swinging spot and people are there pretty much to meet people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So-
what happens next is when they're talking for the first time. So before you get to that,
Which is what happens next.
correct.
Becomes
Right. Before you get to that part, I want Scott to tell his story leading up to that moment. And then at that moment, Jenny picks back up. I feel like I'm directing a movie right now.
Yeah.
I'm glad for that.
Scorsese.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
So when Jenny said that I was the one that wasn't risking anything, it's because when we met, she met me in the middle of a mess that I had created. And, probably 6 years prior to our meeting, I decided I wanted to become an LA County Sheriff's Deputy. And the interesting piece behind that is I was one of those classic pothead stoners, loved to party, had a swimming pool cleaning business. I was, cleaning pools in my shorts and tan, and you can picture the stories that happened during all that time. And married, had a couple of kids, and I got absolutely just burnt out on really living a dual life. At the time, my wife didn't know how much I was partying. I knew there was conflict. I mean, I just knew that I had to change something, but I didn't have the internal wherewithal to make that change, even though I knew I needed to do it. And so I was on the hunt to try to find some kind of job that would give me benefits and retirement, and in an environment that wouldn't allow me the freedom to just spark up a joint whenever I wanted to. Mm-hmm. And I came home one night and turned the TV on and saw this commercial to become an LA County Sheriff's Deputy. I went, I haven't thought about that. And so, of course, if you knew me, you'd say, well, Scott, you're a total pothead. No, you can't do that. It's like, well, I'm a pretty good liar. I could just lie my way through it. And that's exactly what I did. I lied my way through the whole process. I was an athlete. So even in, partying every day, I still stayed in good shape and whatnot. And that was always a big part of who I was. So the physical agility piece was just a piece of cake. I mean, I outshined everybody. When I was in high school, if you're familiar with, 4 or 40 times, the sprint 40 times, I ran a 440 when I was 17, 18 years old. So I was fast and I had good hands and a good baseball player and all that kind of stuff. So it was the part that bothered me was the part that I'd have to be in front of people. They call it the oral interview. And that was when, oh boy, the lights were on. And I was just so freaked out as I was driving down for that oral interview. I'll never forget it. I had my Ford F-250, all my pool equipment in the back. I'm in a pinstripe suit and looking as dapper as I can and scared spitless. And I just thought,
That's a good, safe way to say that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, very dry mouth. And so I just happened to have a little weed with me, so I decided to spark a joint. That'll calm me out, and a little Visine and some Brute cologne, and they'll never smell it. And I walked in there, but that was my norm. Being high every day, that was my norm. So it really did calm me down. And I aced it. All the questions they asked me, I've always been pretty good on my feet. Being able to adapt and be clear-minded and articulate and whatnot. So I aced it, and I scored. I don't know what the score was, but it was in the 90th percentile. Now I knew they could. Do a urine test, do a polygraph, all those things could happen. They weren't happening all the time like they do now. They hadn't learned yet that people lie
all the time.
all the time. And so I remember walking out of there like, living a dual life. So the part of me that's in denial, it was like, scored, I totally nailed that one. And then the other part was like, you moral misfit. I can't believe that you didn't have the wherewithal to go a few hours without, smoking some weed. I mean, really? And so, of course, I brushed that off quick enough and stayed in the victorious place. And pretty soon thereafter, I was hired. And so I had quit smoking weed, quit doing coke, quit doing all the drugs. Still drank a little bit, but not like, to get buzzed, but just, have a beer or whatever. And my big concern at that point was, while I was in the academy, could I remember anything? Because, short-term memory loss with weed, I mean, that might be a problem. But I got through it all. And so fast forward, I work in the jails for the first 11 months. I buy a house, move from the San Fernando Valley to get away from all my normal contacts, thinking, that geographical change, which, of course, in the field that we're in, we know that doesn't work, but I didn't know that at the time. And moved into a block with a bunch of partiers, and I ended up partying with them. So I couldn't escape it. And of course, like anything, when you get comfortable with your environment, I started to party a little bit more and more, but never while working. It was this like line. It's like, what I do on the county's time, it's their business. I'm going to abide by their rules. But when I'm off the clock, party's on. And I've always had the mental and the physical wherewithal to be able to really party hard and still clean up and just be that normal person. And then I get assigned, of all places, on the streets in West Hollywood. So I worked the streets of West Hollywood, Sunset Strip, just the highest crime rated area per capita in all of LA County. Had an amazing training officer that was hard. He was really a difficult person to be around, but he was good at his job. So he taught me well. And from the get-go, it was like, you find any criminal element you can, take him to jail and go find another. It wasn't just wait for a call to come and go respond to it. Let's go find it, because it's out there. And so when I got off of training and started working a one-man car, I got noticed because I was taking more people to jail than anybody, because I had learned that's what you do. You don't, go take a burglary report or respond to a disturbance. It's like you go get out of your car.
You arrest people.
Yeah.
What were, like, when you were driving down the road in your car, like what was a sign that you were looking for that you just stopped and you're like, to jail?
Probably someone that looks like you.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Just kidding. You just set me up too good for that. Well, it was interesting. What was so interesting about West Hollywood is Santa Monica Boulevard. You had a lot of runaways and street people, younger people. Sunset Strip, you had all the hookers and people with money, the movie stars, the music scene and whatnot. So it was just, it was amazing the different eclectic populations that were there. There was again more crime in that area, because you also had a really strong ethnic group of people from all over the world, and they were easy population. It was predominantly a gay community, West Hollywood, so another very vulnerable population. So criminals would come in and do their criminal activity and then get out, because it bordered Beverly Hills, it bordered Wilshire, it bordered Hollywood, North Hollywood. It was real easy in and out. It's kind of why we moved onto an island. There's only one way in and one way out. Criminals don't want to do that. They want to go another way out. And so, it's just, it was pretty easy to spot. And again, being quick on my feet, if I stop somebody and, like, let's say I stopped you and you're a normal guy, and it's like, oh, that wasn't really, I was profiling a little bit, it's like, but I could walk my way out of it. Oh, we heard of a burglary or something, and you kind of match the description. We just had to check it out. Sorry about that. Have a great day. See you later.
Right.
And on to the next. And so
that was really good.
Right?
I was like, oh, that makes sense. Right. Okay, thank you, officer. Yeah. How many times has that happened?
Yeah. So once I got comfortable with that, I got noticed and got asked to be in a special projects unit that dealt with vice narcotics within the West Hollywood area. So we'd actually be building cases for the major narcotics unit. And so unmarked car, sometimes marked car, sometimes no uniform, sometimes uniform, just kind of depend on what we were doing at that time. And
for time frame again, where are we at? Like,
we're 19. We're in the early 80s.
Still in the early.
Yeah, we're still in the early 80s.
So pretty short, close to whenever you guys.
Yeah.
You get saved in '83. You said, right?
Yeah. So in fact, she was maybe you can tell that later on. Was working in the same area.
So we worked the Sunset Strip at the same time. And that's a little known fact. And I was a professional dancer. So
belly dancer.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in between sets, I remember I would sit in this big window up on the third floor where there was a ballroom. They only used it for big events. And I would do my dancing on the main floor where they served dinner. And I would sit in that window like all hot from dancing for 40 minutes straight. And I would hear the sirens. It was right next to Tower Records. It was, literally part of his beat.
Right.
And so just to know when we would meet 3 or 4 years later that
If I would have saw her, I would have, because there's many times I'd see a really hot girl and I'd pull her over. It's like, why'd you pull me over? It's like, because you're hot. I mean, I just wanted to meet you. You know, it's something about the uniform
My name's Scott.
gave you that power. Yeah, I would have absolutely pulled you over, Jenny. No questions
but
asked.
he could have been. My point being that I mean,
Right.
literally, I could have watched him pulling someone over because
Right.
I had that 45-minute break and I would sit in the window and watch.
Yeah.
It was entertaining
wild.
to watch the.
It was entertaining to watch Scott pull over random people.
Yeah. I pulled over Eddie Murphy one time. You know,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I would pull over a limo, see what's inside, and oh, Eddie Murphy, nice to meet you. So,
I'm
but
just
anyway,
curious. What's going on in here, guys?
yeah.
Just curious.
Have a ticket to your comedy show. But anyway, so I got comfortable within that whole type of work, and I started to get involved in partying more again on off hours. It wasn't on hours, but drink a lot after work. And I remember one time it was just awful. I drank too much. I was driving home and kind of dozed off, and I hit the medium and swerved and pulled over, and like, whoa, that was that was not good. I couldn't start my car. And it's like, oh man, so I was gonna walk, to the next call box. In California, they call them call box. My dad, when we were little, he would go, hi box. It's like, what? Call box. Hi box. Anyway, I walked and called, I said, my car's broke down, whatever. I, hit a medium and walk all the way back another mile, and there was a call box right behind me. That's how blasted I was. So anyway, so the CHP Highway Patrol picks me up, and they just took me home, and they didn't give me a ticket or anything. Back then they were enabling that behavior. And then like a week later, I'm driving with two of my deputy buddies, and we're all drinking. I got my jet ski in the back of the truck, get pulled over because my tabs were expired. It's like, I don't care, they'll let you pass.
Right.
Same cop who drove me home the week before, he walks up and he looks in, he sees us all drinking beers, and he like shakes his head and turns around and walks back, doesn't say a word. It's like, that wouldn't happen in today's times, but that's what happened back in the day. So, but now, so I'm having a blast at work, but I'm gone all the time. I'm almost 2 hours away from work from home. So I would just sleep at the station, because if you're arresting a lot of people, you're in court the next day.
Right.
So I'm literally in court, sleeping, showering. I mean, I'm hardly home at all. And so my home life was really falling apart. 2 young kids. When I was home, I was home. I was a good dad. I, don't like watching you and your kids. Same kind of thing. I mean, I was all in when I was home, but it just wasn't an everyday thing. And unbeknownst to me, my ex was flirting and doing business on the side. I didn't, know that. I didn't, wasn't suspicious of it, real trusting. So at any rate, when one day she left with the kids, and I was golfing, and asked me to come home after 9. It's like, I'm at a country club. I'll see it after 18. I'm not coming home at 9. That would not be good. Well, that was all she needed to say, I'm out. And it was, I've never felt emotional pain like that before. And so I just imploded, and I started using more and more. And with when addiction really kicks in, there's a greed factor involved where you'll do anything. And so one time I was, really it all started when we raided a like this motel, like an outside motel where the doors were all outside, but almost looked like a strip mall in a sense. And I'm in one room searching everything, and there's this golf ball size ball of cocaine, and there's nobody in this room. And I was partying on the side, no one knew. And I just put that in my pocket, and no one knew. And it's like, well, that was too stinking easy. And then it's just from there, it went from stopping somebody like you, and if you've got, coke, weed, whatever in your car, and you're a nice guy, you're being respectful. It's like, Corey, Taylor, you guys don't want to go to jail, do you? It's like, no. It's like, well, what's it worth you not to go to jail? It's like, what? It's like, I didn't stutter. What's it worth you not to go to jail? Like anything. Anything? Okay, let's talk. And you're like, really? Yeah, really. Let's talk. I don't want to take you to jail. You don't want to go to jail. And so, of course, I would You take your drugs
But I
from
will
you.
get paid.
Yes.
I don't want to take it. I mean, it's not going to be free. But
No.
I'll take
Well,
it.
but here's the deal. It's like if I take you to jail, you got a felony. You're gonna have to go tell your wife. You're gonna lose. You're talking probably 10, 20 grand, right? So like, what's it worth you not to go to jail? And if you went, oh, a couple $100, it's like, don't insult me. A couple $100? Are you kidding me? Come on.
I'm trying to do you a favor.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I only got 400 on me. It's like, do you have an ATM card? It's like, yeah, let's go there then. I mean, literally, that's what I was doing for a whole entire year. And I had some stipulation not to work with women, gay people, or people who were drunk, because they would get offended when they got woke up, or if I figure a female personality would get offended. So it was only businessmen driving nice cars. That was my profile.
Your target audience.
That was my
His target audience.
I had this head shop, where they call it head shop back in the day, where the paraphernalia and whatnot. And I had a perched view up on a parking lot where I would watch people drive in. I'd wait for the Mercedes, the Beamers, the Jaguars, the Caddies, and men get out. And I know that if there's a man going into there, they just scored, they didn't have their paraphernalia to use, I'm stopping that guy. So as soon as they pulled out, I'd get my little unmarked car, put my little red light on top, pull them over, and you just know they're going, oh no. And I'd befriend them right away and say, listen, I've got to go check your car. There's a robbery, your car matches the description, same kind of a thing. And I said, you don't have any drugs or paraphernalia in the car? And they go, no. I had to ask. So I go in there, check it out, find it, of course. And it's like, you lied to me.
How could you do that?
Now what am I going to do? It's like,
I'm hurt.
let me go? It's like, no. And so that was the scam that I did. And it was just so simple.
So you're pulling people over, you're taking their drugs,
And
taking their
money.
cash.
Mm-hmm. So, and it got to a point where the person said, can you split the drugs with me at least? It's like, okay, here, take half, I'll take half, and just don't come out on the streets again. Just stay at home and use. And that, I mean, it's just like,
Be safe with it.
yeah,
Be responsible.
Yeah,
Right? Be an
don't do
adult.
this again. I mean, it was just crazy. I look back on it, of course, and just shake my head and go, "Oh my gosh, the way I could, I scare myself because I can justify and rationalize anything. I mean, to this day, she won't let me take the car to the dealership to get an oil change. She's afraid I'm going to go buy another car because I can talk myself into it, like I've done 30 times in 30 some odd years. But
He's literally had 30 new cars in 37 years.
Wow.
yeah,
It's a lot of cars.
it is a lot of cars. Yeah. So, but like I told you, I'm in recovery from that now. I've got 4 years without a new car.
Right.
So anyway, it just started to really get bad, and unbeknownst to me, there's people that complain to the department, which happens a lot anyway. So the guys at the desk were all, yeah, whatever, and they just wouldn't do anything with it. But one time we were in court, and I arrested a guy like 6 months later. He had like 5.5 ounces of coke, and he was a little dirtbag. He needed to go to jail, but I only put an ounce in evidence, so I kept 4.5 ounces to myself. And he told his lawyer at when we were in jail and said, or at the court, I had 5.5 ounces, not one. And the attorney went to the judge, and the judge, based on mine and my partner's testimony, wasn't really solid, corroborating. He thought maybe there's something to it, so they went to the department, told them, and they started an investigation. What's interesting is I knew it. I mean, I knew I was being fought. We were being followed. I mean, I was a good cop. I mean, I actually looked up in trees and looked around. I didn't just keep my head down like a dog sniffing for poop. I was looking at everything, and so I knew we were being followed. I knew there was something going on, and they split my partner and myself up. They put us back together to see if we could get back into that activity, which we didn't. And then they tried to set us up one night, and had a gal walk with a briefcase in her hand and said, "Hey, I just found a briefcase on top of a telephone booth, and some Mexican guy was talking on the phone, and he got in his Mercedes and sped off, and he left his briefcase. Will you take it?" It's like, "Nah, just take it to the station. Found property. They'll take care of it." And she persisted. "I can't do that. I get lost." And she was actually playing like she was mentally ill to some degree. So we got her information, which was bogus, and I knew it right away. So I knew we're getting set. Something's going down. But we opened up the briefcase anyway. And there's 3 ounces of hermetically sealed cocaine in there, $500, Colombian passport, family pictures. It's like, this is a dealer's briefcase, Yeah. And so we took it back to the station and went to the major narcotic unit and said, "Hey, this is what happened. You want to take the coke and put it into evidence?" They go, "No, you guys do that." And they were the ones that were investigating us. And we partied with them. We drank after shift with them. We broke doors down with raised together. They were like, our part of the family kind of a deal, like big brothers in a sense, because they were like where we maybe wanted to be at some point. And so I'm in our car. We're getting set up. My partner's writing the report. He's writing that night. We switch off whoever they call it, booking. So he's writing all the paperwork. And so I'm figuring out, how can I get this hermetically sealed cocaine open and just like at the very corner and just get a little bit out.
Get a tiny
little taste
Yeah.
out.
And I actually folded the paper bindle, and I'm thinking, and I'll just got a lighter. I could light that up, and then right when I'm getting ready to try to get that coke, I get our names are called over the loudspeaker. Graham, Desiree, report to the sergeant's office. So I said, you guys stay here. I'll go check it out. And I walked into the station, and as soon as I walk in, 4 or 5 deputies swooped down on me, ripped my gun out, put my hands behind my back. You're under arrest. And it's like, oh, and I played stupid. It's like, what's going on? And I knew exactly what was going on. And so I took me into the captain's office, and I heard Desiree report to the sergeant. It's like, ooh, I know what's going to happen to him. And so we both get arrested. They take me up to my house. I was living with my mom to search that. They searched my house up in the desert already, but I knew they were coming, and I cleaned everything out.
Right.
Nothing was there. In fact, the sergeant who took me back to the house said, man, you were the hardest person we've ever had to follow. It's like, well, I knew you were following me. It's like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. So anyway, major news, national news, ABC, NBC, CBS.
Yeah, for anybody out there, you can literally Google like Scott Graham, LA Sheriff Deputy, and all of this comes up.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? I've got 2 kids. I got child support. I obviously lost my job. I don't want to clean pools. I got a court case. I'm still looking at 6 years of prison. And so I call my friends who are all girls. In fact, they were strippers, and high-end strippers, of course.
Right.
I mean, just where men would bring their wives to watch these shows, even though they would get down to a G-string. And they asked, what are you going to do? I was like, I have no idea. And well, why don't you come to work with us? And it's like, what, like a bouncer? I'm like, all of 5'7". I know I'm strong and everything, and I can run away or run towards somebody, but no, dance with us. It's like, ooh, I hadn't thought about that. That sounds fun. Okay. And so they said, we'll get you all the shows, and they got me shows at nightclubs, at private parties, and I just had to show up, dance 3 songs, and take off. And so that's what I did for 6 months. And it was a blast. Now, I want to make it really clear that I was an exotic dancer because my hips went from side to side, not from front to back. I want to make that really, really clear. Okay? So, Lord forgive me. But anyway, but I never had sex while I was dancing. I want to make that known, too, because I knew what it was like to be cheated on, and I was not going to do that to another man. I just, wasn't going to do that. And it was fun to have that power, actually, to say, no, because I was asked every time, like, do you want to get down with it? It's like, no, let's just have fun. It's a party, you'll regret it in the morning if you do it. Let's just have fun. And then everybody had fun. It was a blast.
These are the conversations that we were bonding over. So I'll explain in a minute.
Great first date material.
Because I had the same
Look at it, 6 years in prison.
Compass.
Yeah.
So anyhow, he comes back from visiting with who was his next door neighbor, who he went to kindergarten and every grade thereafter that I just guessed, right? Good intuition. And he walks by and he slowed down right when he got to me, and it was just this like magical. If it was in a movie, it was like it was more than a glance and less than a stare. I mean, our eyes, we connected. And then he sat down with his friend. And so I'm grilling my friend again. It's like, okay, what's he doing now? He's totally staring at you, da-da-da-da-da. So sure enough, within minutes, he pops back up and walks over and just locks eyes with me and says, hey, I know this sounds like a line, but I really wanted to meet you. Can I sit down for 5 minutes? So I looked at Karen to see if she'd like give me the green light. So she nods. And then I looked at my watch and I tapped it twice and said, go. And he sat down. Now he had been up either one night, 2 nights.
I had danced the night before and was coked out and
cocaine.
drinking
He'd not been to
margaritas.
sleep. And but to your point of how you could still articulate and just how sharp you were, like I had no clue that he was anything like hungover or drug over or whatever. So yeah, but he didn't catch the tap on the watch, and I still laugh about it to this day. So he plops down, and that 5 minutes turned into 5 hours. Yeah. So what we didn't talk about was that he had made ABC, NBC, and CBS. I would find that out 24 hours later. But what we did talk about was he was dancing, and it's like, oh, I dance too. And so we started talking about, yes, my hips go side to side. Isn't that tacky when they go front and back? And like, I mean, everything silly we were connecting on. But then because I love Jesus, and that's what I've been busy doing from 23 to 27, I'm almost 28, is I asked him some of my vision board questions. And I didn't freak him out. I didn't say, hey, I have a vision board. Let me get out my list. You know, like I didn't do that. But I asked one of the primary questions, and that was this. Do you have 2 children? Isn't that odd?
That's
Versus,
weird.
do you have children?
Right.
Right? But I had a vision and had cut out pictures of these kids. They were a precise size, height. These 2 blonde children, 1 boy, 1 girl. And as soon as I said, do you have 2 children? He pulled out his wallet, and there was the proof. This is my daughter. She's in preschool. She's 4. This is my son. He's going to graduate kindergarten. He's 6. And it was like, I mean, at that point, everything just went in slow motion for me. I'm thinking, wow. And now I'm thinking about Jesus. I'm thinking about, you know, because here we are in this very wild kind of setting, and this is not where I usually go.
So that was a question I was going to ask. At that time in the early 80s in California too, what is the vibe there? Is like, are a lot of people like getting into this Jesus thing? If you're in the Jesus thing, is it still kind of liberal where you're kind of like, you're not like super fundamentalist, or like what was the scene like? And you said you didn't want him to think you were weird, so you didn't tell him about your vision board.
So I didn't tell him about my vision board.
Which
and I would ask about Jesus here shortly, because the punchline is I don't date, but I go to church, and you're welcome to meet me on the corner of this and this. And he's all, yeah, I'll do that. I'd love that. But as far as the climate,
like what was
days,
in California at that time too?
You know,
There's a lot of charismatic churches going on.
tons of them, but I would still say it was compartmentalized, and having, you know, been in the secular, you know, literally like non-Christian climate for 23 years of my life was still very compartmentalized. You know, I'm still the only one saved in my family. So it's like, I'm going to wear my cross, and if anyone wants to ask, but I'm created a lot of family arguments by bringing it up and being shut down. So just doing life and a lot of church. Right.
But getting back to your sister, you were going to have a wedding shower for her, right?
Right. So wanted to know if he had kids, saw them, they were beautiful, and wanted to know if he was available the following Saturday, because I was throwing a wedding shower and I had not lined up any entertainment yet. And I thought,
I would love to have a male dancer.
And my ulterior motive, and I can see you with less on, and further check out the goods.
Yes.
And so that's so terrible to say, but that's where my head was at in the 1980s.
Right.
Yeah.
So bottom line, he said, yeah, I'll give you a deal. He did give me a deal, because remember, I danced at parties and clubs and different things, and so I knew I was getting a screaming good deal. And so we made that plan for the following Saturday. Meanwhile, he said, well, I really want to talk to you again. And it's like, well, I'm really busy. I work 3 jobs. And he's all, well, can I call you tomorrow? And it's like, okay. He goes, well, what time? I said, between 6 and 6:30. Because literally that was the only time that I would pick up a call. And he called at 6:02. You did.
Punctual.
Yeah.
Very punctual. And said,
But not desperate. It wasn't 6 o'clock.
Right.
No.
He gave a 2-minute delay.
It seemed like it was a long
but
time.
desperate. But
Right.
here's my point. But desperate, and here's why. He said, I can't wait till Sunday to see you. And I do want to go to church. But is there any way we could just meet at a coffee shop? I mean, I know we could talk on the phone, but I want to talk face to face.
And Scott, you had grown up with a background in church, or Jesus at least. Like, you, even through all of this, all of being a police, partying, doing drugs, all of this, like, you were still there, right?
I still love the Lord, and just didn't have a healthy reverence is all. But I loved him. I believed in him. Believed in miracles. You know, so yeah, none of that changed. So that's why it didn't throw me at all for her to. In fact, the church that we were going to, it's like, well, I've been to that church before. I got a miracle happened to me. I had high blood pressure when I was 18. Too many drugs I was using. It wasn't really a medical condition that I was born with, but I think I was, cured. I didn't,
Right.
Blood pressure went lower. So yeah.
Yeah, you went off medication. You told me about that miracle while we were visiting at the cantina, after I brought up the I don't date,
Right.
you can meet me at church thing, and when he found out what church it was. So it was Church on the Way. Jack Hayford was a pastor for all of our listeners.
But before that, so I had danced for this gig I did, and the bride to be wanted me to write her wedding vows for her. That's how, it was like I was a friend all of a sudden, because I didn't want to get in her pants, and it's like, no, don't do that.
And
so
if he could write like he could dance, these vows would be amazing.
well, I'm telling you, so I wrote a really cool wedding. I was into poetry. I wrote that. I went over to her house, and she wanted to pay me in Coke. I said, great. So I got a gram of Coke for writing up a little wedding vow, and that's when I went over to her house. It's like, want to do some lines? And she's like, no. It's like, cool, more for me.
That's and then he poured it out on my glass table. Yeah. So spoiler alert, we didn't make it to the coffee shop for the coffee.
Right.
Right. I let my guard down. I let him come over to pick me up, and then now he's chopping cocaine on my glass table, and I'm sitting there like chatting with Jesus about this. Right. It's like he has 2 kids. He has all those freckles. Like everything is this.
This wasn't a part of my vision board.
And this was not on my vision board. Right.
But keep in mind, you said at the beginning of the story, you guys got married 3 weeks later.
Right.
Right.
Told you I can be persuasive.
Right.
Well, that is the total truth. But the Holy Spirit can be even more persuasive when you have ears to hear and a heart to.
But really, none of it made sense. I mean, here I'm facing prison time. I just lost my career. I don't have any job right now.
And this is what he's telling me.
I mean, I'm brutally honest.
This is what he's telling me as we're sitting in my apartment and he's snorting coke.
Okay.
So now he's coming clean. Now I'm arrested. Now don't worry. I have the best attorney in all of Los Angeles.
Right.
They have never lost a case representing a first responder. And I'm like holding back because I'm saying, well, you're going to lose this case.
Right. Why didn't you just tell him to leave?
Because there were too many things on that vision board. And at this point I was negotiating with the Lord and saying, I'll be friends with him. I'll be friends with him. I'll be the best pen pal anyone could have.
Right.
I love to write, and in fact, we have the letters still. Giant hordes of letters we wrote each other every day, and we always joke that we met and married, and then we courted while he was incarcerated.
Right.
So he did it back.
So let's jump through this. So you got married, you got pregnant a little shortly after that, right?
So I do have to interject and say that he was willing to wait to get married, like 6 months, go through marital counseling at the church so we could sit in the whole accountability.
Find out what was going to happen with the court case.
Find out what was going to happen in the court case. And after our first counseling meeting, we went out for coffee and pie after, and he goes, just offhandedly, he goes, I'd marry you tomorrow. And I'd say, and I just responded with, I'm so busy tomorrow, but I can fit it in on Friday. So this is like, so this is like from Monday. Right. This is like Monday. He says this, and he says it in this way. Yeah. He was not sarcastic. He was serious. I was not sarcastic. I was serious. And literally, after I said I could fit it in on Friday, he said, "Great, let's do it." And we literally got out a piece of paper and divided up the tasks, like who's going to get the airfare, who's going to hire the limo, because he's got to be back because Saturday morning he gets to see his kids.
Well, one thing, too, I want to make it clear. I mean, it sounds compulsive on my part, right? But I had already met her mother, her sister, her grandmother, all her cousins in a G-string. So I knew the whole family already.
At least the women, right? That was such a great day. I got to tell you, it's a shame that the smartphone wasn't invented. But the brain, I've still got the video on repeat. Yeah, that was a great afternoon.
I love it.
That was fun.
It was hilarious.
So that happens. You get married. You get pregnant shortly after, and then
another Holy Spirit thing.
You were 6 months pregnant when your court case finally happened, right? 7 months.
We were in court every 2-3 weeks.
Right.
They were always continuing, and it was this like.
We had 9 months together before that.
Not quite.
Okay.
Not
yeah.
Close enough.
So around 6-7 months pregnant, almost 9 months together, 8 months together, and you guys are thinking that you're going to go to court and it's going to be like probation, community service, that kind of thing.
Right.
And what happened in court?
Well, right before court, we decided to plead guilty. We both just
not right before.
Well,
October, and you were sentenced in January. Long enough for us to sit in it.
Yeah. It was a tough decision, but we both felt just so compelled via the Holy Spirit. It's like, if you want to have a life with me, you've got to, be open and honest about what happened. And so we did, relying on the mercy of the court. So we go to court, and my pastor's there, my parents are there, Jen's there. Obviously, she's
now very
6 months
visibly,
pregnant.
very visibly pregnant.
And the judge said, I've never done this before, but I went to 3 other judges to get their opinion on what to do with you, because clearly you've changed your life. You're married. You're a good person. I can see you did an unhealthy thing, but we cannot let you get away with that. It wouldn't look good for the community, so on and so forth. So he then sentenced me to 2 years, which was a low term. I could have gotten 6 years at a high term. And the district attorney, who was just really a piece of work, he was just a challenging man. Ultimately, he died in court of a heart attack. It's like,
what?
Shortly after.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know. And I wasn't that sad. But anyway, he said, he's a flight risk, he needs to go right this very moment. And that's what happened. Right from there, we'd gotten into an apartment the day before. Again, thinking we were going to get probation. And they took me away right then and there. And that was the first and only time I've ever had a panic attack. Literally, I was in a room, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is like real. This is actually happening. The nightmare began right from that moment. And they whisked me up to the protective custody unit. And it was at that time, I don't know if you're familiar with, but that was when Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was caught.
In the same
I was
24-hour
next to
period.
him in there. Yeah, so that was, that was a high profile case. And so I stayed up there for a couple of weeks while they were processing me, and then went to Chino for 2.5 months, where they continue to process you before you go to whatever state penitentiary you're going to go to, which could be like 7 different ones, I think. And
So Richard Ramirez was in the cell next to Scott, and in that particular part of the jail, when someone would come to visit, besides frisking you and making you feel like you're a criminal as well, which that was true the whole time you were incarcerated, any time I came to visit. But in addition, in that spot, they would only let one person have a visitor at a time, and the visitor was monitored. There was a lot a lot of staff and a lot of eyes on you, and literally it was so demeaning. Like when it was his turn and I was in place, like I didn't get handcuffed, but when he was ready to come, they would open his cement door with its little window, and they would not just handcuff him, they would cuff his ankles.
Right.
And then pull him on a chain like a dog and bring him over to where then they would chain him to where he was sitting, and we would visit through this piece of glass and pick up this phone.
Right.
I thought, this is it. For 2 years I'm going to watch this. We're
Right.
going to do this and do the hand through the glass.
Right.
Right. It was intense. But in my peripheral vision here on the side, the deal is there was a Dutch door, which is a door that's cut in half, and the door would be open. And so that view from maybe, I want to say 15 feet away, was the corner cell. And that was Richard Ramirez's cell. So I have seen Richard Ramirez countless times from 15 feet away, while I'm waiting after I've, gone through clearance,
Right.
while I'm waiting for them to take
Right.
Scott out of the cell. And he would lick his window
That's weird.
over and over again.
So, Scott, you served
sorry,
2
but-
years?
Crazy.
I actually served just under 2 years, because the good time that you get, get in trouble, it was 13 months, and then another 13 months on parole after that.
Mm-hmm.
So
you serve that, and you get out, right? And you guys were married. You had
I had
a child while he was in
incarcerated.
prison.
Correct.
That
Yep.
had to have been incredibly difficult,
yep, first time I saw him was through glass again.
which is crazy.
Mhm.
It's like I can't even imagine it.
Right.
And then I think the beginning of kind of Confrontations. Tell us that story.
Yeah, it was so amazing. Another God shot. God's hand has been on this from day one. But I was working with Jenny in her financial services business. I went and got my insurance license, which got revoked because you can't have a felony and have insurance and license. But it was something that I did, and I'm still kind of proud of that. I was brain was still working, thank goodness. But I'm at a car dealership looking at cars, not wanting to buy, but seeing if I could get a car salesman that might be interested in working with us. And so I'm looking at this old beat up VW van, hippie van, and this guy walks up and he starts talking like, car dealers do, or the car salesmen do. And from just a few words, it's like, this guy knows nothing about cars. I just kind of sensed it. And I look at him, and he's this big weightlifting, big guy. And I said, you haven't been doing this very long, have you? And he's like, nope. And I said, what'd you used to do? And he said, I was in Port Hueneme Police Department. Like, really? I was LA County Sheriff, ex-LA County Sheriff. How come you're not in the force anymore? And he says, well, I got into steroids, and I turned into cocaine and alcohol, and I ended up stealing $35,000 of cocaine out of the evidence locker and got popped and didn't go to jail. I got 5 years probation, and now I'm speaking at any, service organizations, churches, whatnot. And it's like my jaw just dropped. It's like, are you kidding me? Me too. And so we formed a friendship, and we're still friends to this day.
And
At that time, were you speaking like out and like?
No, I was
brand
new.
new. Okay.
In fact, my first time I told my story, my parole officer, who was teaching a criminology class at a college, he knew I was, I was a good guy, that I just, really screwed up. But at the core of who I was, he knew he didn't have to worry about me, And he says, I want you to come tell your story to my class. It's like, whatever you want. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I'm your golden boy. And that was my very first time I ever, I can really thank him for getting me into this industry.
But I still remember you coming home from meeting
John,
and you were so excited, and you were explaining to me about this word intervention and this other cop, and he was going to let you shadow him this coming weekend, like you were going to go see it happen.
Right.
And he was already they bonded instantly. It was like, we could even be good cop, bad cop. Like
Right.
if you want to say something right out of the gate, there was that trust between them. It was and we're friends to this day. Here we are,
Right.
all these decades later. And then he came home from that following weekend of seeing that intervention, and it was like he was enrolling in college. He was going to become a drug and alcohol counselor. Like he says, I found what I want to do. I found what I want to do.
So at that point, okay, two things. First off, just in case anyone hadn't put it together yet, Confrontations that you guys own and run, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do interventions, you teach interventions, you do recovery stuff with both the people who are sick and families. You do a lot of family programs and different treatment centers. So they're in this recovery addiction world, right? At that time, right, when you met John and you were like, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go be a counselor, I'm going to do all this, right? How long had you been clean for? Like, when did you get clean in jail? Like, I don't know what, I don't know that.
Clean, I was clean before I got in jail. Jenny and I, I was still dabbling a little bit. I was trying to be clean. And it was when I got, we call it when I got water baptism. It was the day, it was August of 86.
Early August.
And so I had literally a year and a half of sobriety under my belt at that time, and could have used while I was in prison. It was easy to drink. They had Pruno, it was made their own alcohol, and heroin. People were dying from overdoses. I mean, I could have played the game if I wanted to.
And I want to point out, because this is so interesting, there's so many listeners where you're thinking, I think my significant other has a problem, or I think my teenager has a problem. And to this point, Scott still didn't think he had a problem. He thought that everything was situational. So it was really profound that first day that he went to UCSB, so it's the University of California up in Santa Barbara where he went. And he comes home from his first day of full class load. I remember that day. It was like, how was your first day? It was like we were both so excited. And he stopped and said, today I found out I'm an addict, an alcoholic. And I was like, hallelujah. I knew that. I knew that within 24 hours of meeting you. I didn't say that again.
Right.
I had more restraint then. Now you can see I just pop off as much as I want.
Right.
But back then I was a little more tempered.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think as specifically Scott with you and hearing your story, it's what I'm hearing is from the beginning of where you come is I think you're just really good at sizing people up and then moving them in the direction you want them to go.
Yeah,
and I think that's what what you've always been doing. And then I think a lot of us are if you're kind of a people person or self-identify as that. It's like you do that all the time. We always talk about selling is human. We're not always selling a product. We're just moving you in the direction I want you to go for me, for whatever reason I want. And I feel like I just think it's like, it's not that crazy of a story. It's like you were just presented because of some of the work you're doing with kind of unusual circumstances. And I'm hearing the story and be like, I feel like I was like, I align with a lot. It's like, would I do the same thing in that situation?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, if you're really being honest, it's like, maybe. Yeah, probably. I don't know.
It's
like,
also too of like how many other people were doing it too at the same time and have done it, right? You can go into crazy hypotheticals, but Scott's the one that got caught.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. I mean, there's more police officers don't than do, for sure. But there's definitely, they're human beings, and and it happens. I remember my high school football coach came to visit me when I was in prison, and just a great mentor for me. He's a great man, and he said, "Scott, the only difference between you and me is you just got caught. That's really the only difference. So don't shame on yourself anymore."
Yeah, and then but the same thing too. The thing is, sometimes it can be like you talked about like your first day of school, coming back and saying like, "Well, now I have a problem," because really it just became everything else was normal. I think that like through my life have had ups and downs back and forth with substances, and I think I struggled for a long time to ever even just admit that like, hey, listen, like I dealt with an addiction to nicotine since I was like 18 years old.
Right.
And actually even have to, and for me mentally, and like even saying that out loud now, I get like cringy because like you didn't have to do it. It's like, but like if you just like come down to like just being honest, like that's what it is. But it's like I tell myself a story all the time. It's like, this is like, it's a social thing. I like to do it. Like I've always had control of it. And like the reality is, it's like, it's not until like, and it was really within the last year of actually using that word with my wife for the first time of being like, and again, I'm not saying like I'm perfect with any of it or have control of it, but it's just like, that's just like identifying, I guess, that you have a problem, using that word of like, I would never think to call myself an alcoholic.
Right.
Or an addict to nicotine, but like that was like.
So I want to self-disclose and tell you I started smoking at the age of 9 when my friend and I started stealing cigarettes out of our mom's purse. And I was the only kid in elementary school that smoked in the bathroom during recess. And the thing of it is that, there was only one recess that I smoked at. So I've always been able to moderate, is my point. And so by the time I met Scott, I was smoking maybe a pack a year.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And apparently I'm remembered, from my party days as, you were the one that would split the acid in fourths and just take a quarter to see how that went. Right. And so.
And me, one's good, two's better.
And that's my point that I want to make. That's my point that I want to make is that, I know what it's like. Like I grew up with parents that would split a beer on a hot day, maybe. And if it was, honey, do you want to split a beer? And you said no, it was like, okay, I think I'll grab an iced tea. Like, so I was raised in that, around that.
And I sweat when people leave a little bit in the glass. It's like, oh, you're wasting that.
He's not joking.
Right.
He is not joking.
Sure.
And so, but I've had a food addiction. And so that also started at the age of 9. And I won't get into all of that. But that's when I'm working in recovery and I look at you and I can say legitimately, I'm in recovery. Yeah. I'm one of us.
Yeah,
sure. Like I'm not an outsider or what they call a normie.
Right.
So it's amazing because fast forward, we see people with addictions to video gaming, process addictions or gambling. It doesn't have to be a substance. And when we see the common denominators all the way across, I think it's going to be a better day versus compartmentalizing.
Yeah, we just want to use the word dysfunction.
All the dysfunction, right? Right.
Can we interrupt dysfunction?
So we started our little business in 1988, and I thought I'm gonna run the phones, I'm gonna run the money, I'm gonna run the talking to the people, I'm gonna vet people out. I got to make sure, I got to see, is there too many guns? Is there too much danger? Because I want to keep him for a while. And we kept losing cases because they needed a female, or they insisted on, I'll move on and find a female that does this. And it's like, oh no, I can't do this. And thinking more about the eating disorder history and just, there were too many parallels. And I thought, because it didn't occur to me that we'd get eating disorder interventions, which as it turns out is a part of our business. I just compartmentalized it into the drug thing and the danger around it. And so I went really slow, but I became a counselor, and to this day, he's always done the lion's share of the interventions because I'm really good at selling him, right? It's like, off you go. And he really is so good on his feet, and the instincts. There's so much about what we do that's practical, that's pragmatic, that you know, you could do this. I mean, I could walk you through how to do this, but you cannot have the skill set that someone with the innate skills that you have, the intuition, and then as you've only but grown in your faith in the Lord, your ability to read situations now many times over multiplied, because you do need to know its timing, its use of words, its...
So with your, I guess, experience, right, and everything that both of you have been through and encountered and had over the years, and now you've been doing this for 35 years, which is amazing, right? What, from like with that experience and with your own lives that you lived through before you started doing this, what's the secret sauce of Carefrontations, of how you do things, of why you do things? What is it, like, how do you approach things like guiding people through these family programs or these recovery programs or an intervention itself that's kind of different or something you've taken from your experience?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that we don't go everywhere we're invited. We only go where we're sent. And so everything is bathed in prayer. We want to sift everything through the grid of the Holy Spirit. We pray over every single intervention. We have a group of people who pray for every intervention that we do. And so we say to people that, you know, that are believers that will understand this, I know you will, is that we're flying by the seat of our spirit and not by the seat of our pants. And so with that, we can let go of the outcome. We can have the confidence, not cockiness, but confidence that we're going to get the download from the Holy Spirit as to what to say, when to say it, should it be said. You know, because we have a process, obviously, that I'm a very systems-driven guy. It's like, boy, you don't stay with my systems that work. I have a hard time adapting, even though I can think out of the box and I can go with the flow. Jenny, way more than I can. I'm very much just like, don't change it if it's not broken kind of a guy.
Right.
And yet I you know, through Jenny's, through how she's wired, it's allowed me to stretch and grow in that realm. So that's my answer, is driven by the Spirit for sure.
Absolutely.
Is what's helped, because what's interesting is that because of the places we get to go, we're in the middle of people's messes, just like when Jenny came into the middle of my mess, and we get to go into deep waters with people who are ready for something different. And so therefore we get to say things to people that we would never get away with saying ever. I mean, I've had people say, it's like, I can't believe you said that to my dad. It's like, it was the truth.
And it's amazing what you can say when you can peel back the anger and the frustration, and and
the fear.
And the fear, right? But we can go all through these things and still feel fearful. But I remember a turning point, and it was literally, gosh, maybe 20 years ago. And in the early years, we really were all about filtering out, and we still are filtering out anger. We'll always be all about that because it's not useful in any of the points that we're doing, any of the services we do. But you can be angry, and it's the word says, right, in your anger do not sin. And so I no longer was editing out the word anger out of a letter. So oh, well, can't you just say frustrated, or can't you say like that changed 20 years ago when I had someone that had the word angry in their letter, like I don't know how many times. Yeah. And it was a son talking to a grown mom, and how angry he was that she wasn't present as he grew up, how angry he was that she missed all the milestones, how angry he was, like he just had this list, but he had no anger in him. He was reflecting back on having anger. And so he was able to share it with the sweetest, like all of it, what was louder than those words was, I want my mom back. Yeah. It's not too late. I want you in my life. And so when you pepper it like that, when the love is louder than
Right.
The hurt.
the dropping of the guard and the vulnerability to tell you how hurt I either was or am. That's the secret sauce. And that element is in our family work, our recovery work, our intervention work, our transport work. It's in all of it. And so I think that's the secret sauce. And then I want to go back to how we're a front for our ministry. So I want to say it's been so cool that we have helped atheists and people of every like nationality. You've worked in Taiwan and London and like around the world. I've had 6 Canadian work permits. Like we've worked in all these different cultures and all these different settings. And so we aren't coming to evangelize as an overt mission. It's almost like we're secret agents, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I don't leave a family program without, several people now having downloaded the Messenger International app, right? That we are finding people who are starving in these secular centers or an intervention group, and someone's leaving going, you mean I can have this on my phone? Like I could be getting fed like this all the time? And so we're always at work championing the glory of God.
Yeah.
And we're also taking the risk of saying, if it doesn't offend anybody, we're going to pray. And so we do that with a family. And I remember one family, they all raised their hand and like several of them in unison said, it'll offend us. And so I just I shut down. And so the prep was over. I didn't get to pray. I went back to my hotel. And then I got on the floor, which is, that place where I meet Jesus. And it was like, I choked. Can I have another chance? And I knew the Lord wanted me to pray over this group. So the next morning, you never like straggle into an intervention. You come as a united team, you caravan, you go in together. So we were at our meeting spot, and I said, I'm just going to risk offending you, but I can't go in uncovered. In my faith, I'm gonna need way more than I can bring to the table of my own strength. So you can think good thoughts, have good vibes. You can leave this circle, but let's hold hands. Like I was like, let's hold hands. Like
church.
usually that was before COVID. We could hold hands, right? And we held hands, and I prayed, and I felt. I mean, it was no milquetoast prayer, and I was exhilarated, thinking I'm not gonna get that check, and but I have your pleasure, Lord. And it was so great to get dropped off and be paid. It really was nice. It's like, I'm still going to pay you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's amazing. I think it's so cool too. I think sometimes there's like this pressure. Like I don't think you necessarily need to be in your business meeting, like saying like, "Hey, we're Christians and we're here to be like counselors or supporting you." I think we've brought it up multiple times, but like when like the disciples asked Jesus, like, how will they know that we're followers of Christ? And his response is, they'll know you by your love. And so look at what love, like the scripture says love looks like. And you guys are doing that. So like, I feel like, sorry, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent thing, but like people, when they're at this point, I would imagine this is not their first step in trying to find a solution.
Right.
Like the family, the friends, the people that love them, like they have, at the spot was like, we've tried everything else we can try. And we're at this point.
Yep.
So there's a desperation that has to be there. That's like looking for a lifeline. And then they get to connect with you. And whether you say it's in the name of Jesus, like whatever, like if you're bringing that spirit, then the same power that lives in you is the same power that raised you. Like that, like there is like, they're going to notice something is very different. We've tried everything else. And I'm sure a lot of it is like, there's like practical skills that you're bringing but like, there's also like the spirit of Jesus that you're bringing into the room that they have not experienced before.
Yep.
So whether they know it or not, it's like they've just got to experience the peace that surpasses understanding or grace in the love of Jesus, that if that just opens their door to being willing to pray and go through, or whatever happens tomorrow, man, it's like,
yeah,
like
we always say too that I feel
so
like
much more powerful.
I've been given the gift of desperation.
Talk on that a little
Explain
bit more.
that, yeah.
Well, it's like being at the end. It's like there's nothing left. It's like it's either this or I'm dead. I'm done. And so that's what's really fueled my recovery. I know yours too. It's like there's a desperation. There's a hunger. to get it right and not to ever go back again. So I really do look at that desperate moment as a gift, and you hear that a lot in the recovery community, that you know the gift of desperation. And it really makes sense because it's like if there's a way out. I mean, we're wired in such a way. Unfortunately, we're like water. We take the path of least resistance, and you know, if you've raised kids, you know that without your guidance and you know, discretion and correction and education, they'll run amok. You know, they will get away with everything they can get away with. It's just that wicked heart that we, you know, have.
Man, you saying that just triggered a quote from
Triggered.
Sorry, I don't know if that's
Hate that word.
whatever that was. But it's I heard it first from this Franciscan monk named Richard Rohr, but he was talking about Julian of Norwich, and she was talking, or I don't even know if Julian is a man or a woman. Sorry. But he was talking about grace, and he says it's like first the fall and then the recovery from the fall. And he says both are the mercy of God.
Yeah.
Which I just think is, we a lot of times think the fall, like that's not God, but like grace is just the mercy from the recovery from it.
Right.
And it's like, but both are actually the mercy of God in your life,
Both
working in
gifts.
you. And it's like,
Yeah. They are
and I don't know if I've heard that quote a couple times, and I don't know if it ever just landed really the way until you just said that.
Cool.
About that
Love that.
desperation. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, so we just feel so privileged and honored to, you know, have literally been with thousands and thousands of families with the work that we've done to give them hope, to guide and direct, to share our testimony. But you know, we're so humbled because the feedback that we get literally with, I mean, almost every single intervention or family program that we've done is like, that was amazing. I mean, I had no idea, or, you know, you saved our life, and it's like, yeah, we're just, you know, a piece of the puzzle is all we are. And so God didn't waste anything. You know, any of the mess that we both made, he didn't waste any of it. And we're still not done. It's still this journey. And to think about too, you know, we're not immune from everything. I mean, we have a daughter who we put in treatment 5 times, still a mess. We lost a nephew, lost a mom. We have a granddaughter who did some mental health treatment. I mean, the list goes on. We have so many skeletons, a closet's not big enough. You know, we need the shed in the back, and it's overflowing. And so it just allows us to walk people down a road that we've walked. It's hard to lead somebody down a road you haven't walked. And so that's just, we've, you know, utilized that as an asset versus, you know, something that we're embarrassed by.
I mean, there's a level of empathy that you have to be able to bring into every conversation.
Yeah.
It's even more than empathy, because empathy is like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but like you've literally walked.
Well, but that can be a double-edged sword though too, because at least for me, because I'm real black and white, matter of fact. Recovery is so super important to me because I literally lost everything, and more than once. I mean, we had some rocky roads for a while too when I was struggling and, you know, relapsed and, you know, get back on my feet again. And, you know, so it's super important to me. And I find that too often people don't take it as seriously as I think they're supposed to. It's the only life-threatening issue. You think about the thousands of people that die every year from dysfunction. I mean, drug and alcohol, over 100,000. But what about the mental health, the suicide, the eating disorder, the everything, the destruction that this thing, dysfunction, creates? And yet we as a people, we minimize it, we downplay it, we negotiate over it, we're afraid of it. And it's like, really? It's like we are in battle, and it's all masqueraded as the enemy. You know, all of that is like the foothold the enemy has on all of us. And so, you know, as believers, we're called to be warriors on this side of heaven. Who knows? Maybe we'll be warriors on the other side of heaven too. I don't know, but we're in battle. And so that's what we're fighting. We're fighting in the trenches, and with confidence, without fear, right?
I want to ask you. We're definitely starting to wind down for sure. But I wanted to ask you 2 kind of more practical questions, right? Of somebody's listening to this, and the first one is, what is like a sign or the sign that either I or somebody that I love around me has a bigger problem, has this bigger issue that can use or needs treatment, needs, you know, and or intervention like needs more than whatever is happening right now? Like, is there a sign? Is there something there? When does somebody need help?
Well, unfortunately, people tend to wait way too long before that help is sought after. I want to say that. It makes for a tougher, intervention, tougher treatment experience. So back to, if people can be true to their intuitive sense, because we all are very intuitive. We know when something's amiss. And so to me, it's a continued and repeated unrest a person has inside of their heart. If there's problems in all areas of life, any area of life, financially, relationally, spiritually, any area, if it's a problem that's causing duress, then it needs to be addressed. And if it's more than just a one-time, oops, I'm having a bad day, it's continuing, or I'll take care of it, it won't happen again, and yet it happens again.
And you were living a double life. So you were rocking it at work, breaking those arrest records. And so that's another thing, an error that people make. They do have that turmoil. They do have that intuition. He's in trouble or she's in trouble. They're in trouble. And because all of their life has not fallen apart. So be wary. Don't get caught up in that, because
the functioning.
So many, when I look at, people in the entertainment industry, the sports industry, the government, the United States government that we've intervened on, in those where they're just fantastic in their public sector, right, facet of their life, but really their personal life. So, even one area out of order, it warrants you going forward, I think.
And when the stats are very clear, the people with the higher profile position hit a lower bottom because they're able to keep everybody at bay with their intellect, or they're making money, that kind of thing. I've been in a governor's house before, intervening, not on the governor, but someone very close who has a very high so it crosses all socioeconomic boundaries, and employment stratus.
And look at how early we start to doubt our gut, doubt our intuition. How kids are told to shush. And I can't tell you how much flack we come up against with people saying, oh no, the kids are too young. And it's like, we worked as counselors, drug and alcohol counselors, in middle schools, high schools, and let me tell you, your 11-year-olds are smarter than you. No, I wouldn't put it like that. But I'm saying that they are
more intuitive.
And they are more intuitive, and you're not giving them the space to have a voice. So a lot of our work crosses into that adolescent, and that's unusual, that people don't even think about, gosh, you could interrupt a kid. Yeah. Right?
One of the things that you started this answer with to this question was so many of these kind of interventions and seeking out treatment, right? It happens way too late, and it could happen way earlier, right? Do you guys have like any stories or like experiences of like what does that mean exactly? Like, it's like people wait too long, like it's, I don't know, like what does that mean exactly?
Well, you think about it, probably 9 out of 10 people who experiment with alcohol or drugs mature their way out of it. But 1 out of 10 doesn't. And that 1 out of 10 affects 100% of the population. You think about it. So everybody's being affected. And so to intervene or interrupt early, because an intervention is nothing more than a glorified family meeting that feels like a surprise party, kind of like a funeral, and a live birth all at the same time, facilitated by an objective person. That would be one of us. And so you're just facilitating and creating a forum where everybody gets to be truthful, respectful, non-judgmental, non-opinionated. It's basically, here's what I see, and here's how I feel, and here's what I want. That's what an intervention is. And so to be able to create that forum early on, because you have so many kids who are the failure to launch, you have so many young kids who are stuck on their devices and lost in space. You have so many marriages who, they live together, but they don't love together. And it's fracturing our entire society. And so we just, it's never too early, and it's never too late.
And I want to jump off on it's never too late. That there is not a month that goes by that we don't hear a heartwarming story So this month we met someone who was in active addiction for over 20 years, lost custody of their children, like literally like most people would have given up after 10 years, multiple treatment stays, multiple problems with the law. Like a lot of people want to say, no, they're a lost cause. And so I would want anyone listening to say, don't be the judge of if it's a lost cause. Check your own heart and check your own pulse. And do you have enough love and bravery to risk loving out loud, to risk putting an idea on the table for them to accept or reject? Because at the end of the day, I want to know that if I could have said something, I don't want to be wondering, what if I'd have said something?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Am I correct in assuming too? I think I might have an assumption that like from like the movies or TV or whatever, that every time an intervention happens, well, the next step is somebody's got to go away, like going to whatever.
Right.
Is that inaccurate? Like,
No,
is it because it's like that's what we
accurate.
like was like. I would feel like, man, it's really like I don't know if we want to get to that point because I don't know if I'm ready to ship my son away to go to rehab or whatever the thing is. Like, so we think that every or at least I was assuming like
it is accurate, but in the next breath, we do plenty of soft interventions where the first step is we're gonna try some counseling, or we're gonna get an evaluation. We're gonna get a brain scan. We're gonna see. We're gonna look at the science in your brain and see what this is. So it isn't an absolute. It's just a norm.
Yeah.
It is a norm because, again, to his point, that we're waiting so long, often way too long.
Yeah, we could be going
That-
for an
wonder if we-
evaluation.
And at that point,
if you went earlier,
if you're going
Yeah.
earlier,
a better
then
chance of
those
not
other-
having to do that.
then those
yes.
other types of answers and solutions are put on the table. But classically, people do not think of intervention unless it's a last ditch effort. Therein lies, it usually correlates to something like where the
Right.
plane leaves in 2 hours.
Yeah. The bags are packed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I'm super excited because whenever this comes out over the next couple of weeks, you're going to be able to see some content from the Grams, from Confrontations actually go on to Kingdom Empowered. We want to make those available to people if you're in that position. And I want to bring up one more thing of yesterday we were actually filming some of that content. And one of the things that I was talking to Scott about was we were talking about kind of a question that I think comes up fairly often when you're dealing with someone who has an issue or has a problem of like, well, they're not at rock bottom yet. Like they have to make this decision for themselves.
Right.
Like they have to decide that they want this, and then we can come in and help them. Right. And one of the things that you said, and it hit me so hard, was for a lot of people, rock bottom is death. It's not just having a bad experience.
Yeah. I mean, if I always hear that, and my question when someone says, they've got to hit their own rock bottom, I say, and you know where that is and when that is? And they're like, well, no. I said, well, what if it's death? Or what if they go to jail? I mean, it's like when I see somebody in dysfunction, I picture them like they're clutching their chest. It's like they're having a heart attack. And it's like, would you just go, we're going to wait until you actually have the heart attack, then we'll take you to the hospital? It's like, no, it's like, get in the car, we're going.
Yeah.
And yet this illness that we're dealing with, the dysfunction around human behavior, kills more people than all the diseases combined every year, but yet we minimize it. So people in dysfunction are not the reason to go. They're not healthy enough to be the reason. Like if you said, don't go for us, go for you, I'd pull the Gibbs and Denos and slap you upside the head on NCIS. Like, are you kidding me? It's like, let me be your reason today. Show me how much I mean to you. And then when you start to get well, you can be part of that reason. But we want to be the fabric of your healthy walk for the rest of your life. That's how we do life. We do it together. And there's this messaging that goes on in the recovery community that says, no, you got to do it for yourself. Don't do it for your spouse. Don't do it for your family. And it's like, I look at it and go, well, if that's true, how come so many people relapse? How come so many people don't go when they need to go? That doesn't make sense to me. So let's try some new manna. It's like, let's do this together. That you call it a family illness. How about we call it a family recovery?
And you think of the most healthy people, like people who are heroes in our eyes, and they tend to not be self-centered and self-absorbed. right? They're outward focused. They have such good self-care that they have enough and an overflow to share, right? To be generous. And Mother Teresa and people that work tirelessly for others. And so why would we have someone who's so self-absorbed? Why would we promote that they go in when you're self-absorbed enough to do it for you? Like, this is like crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy because we want you to be so healthy that you do recovery for you, because self-care is like so important, but also for others.
Yeah. Well, think about this too. I mean, don't you hope that if a group of people who you professed that you love came in front of you and said, please, 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 we want to do life with you, go for us, wouldn't you hope that you would say, if not for me, I go for you, that you would have that kind of wherewithal? And it is so sad to have somebody, I'm grateful it's only like 1 out of 10 times, that says no. And it's like, you're not enough for me, is really the message. Drugs are more important than you are right now. Doesn't mean I don't love you, it just means drugs are more important. My dysfunction is bigger than you right now. And that is so sad to witness. But I think it's important to know, how much do I matter to you? Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be in a relationship with somebody where I do all the giving and they do all the taking. That's unhealthy. It should be pretty equal. Not that we don't, carry each other's burdens in seasons of time, but it's not this, the seasons of time we get involved in, they've been going on for decades. It's like, boy, you're getting some of your unhealthy needs met through that relationship, looks like to me.
Yeah.
So, and if that's good with you, carry on.
Right.
But most people, it's not good with them.
I've been thinking about this. I feel like people I know have gone through like programs, whether AA or SA or whatever, the story that you were saying, they go to a meeting and they're like, kind of like, hey, I'm Corey, I'm an addict. You go through it. Is that appropriate to continually identify yourself with the addiction? Is that actually healthy? And then what I was thinking about this morning was like, is it biblical, or am I taking the because like I think about 2 Corinthians, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. All things have passed away, behold, all things have come new, become new. Now, is that script like? Where's, I guess, the line, or how do you guys view
Such a
that?
great
How would
question.
you, specifically of a person of faith that's going through these things, like what's the healthy boundary there?
Yeah, we struggle with that as well. Like, I would identify myself as, hi, my name is Scott, and I am free and sober. And I used to be addicted, but today no more. Now, I know that cognitively I'm one decision away from going back, but it is so far away from me as far as the East is from the West.
Right.
And because I walk in freedom, because of my healthy disdain or hate, which is biblical, hate what God hates, love what God loves. And I know he hates any of us who self-medicate instead of Christ medicate, And so, we struggle with that as believers.
Because just to the point of that scripture and so many others, being a new creation in Christ, it would be, to me, blasphemy. But the 12-step movement is so successful, and so we respectfully agree to disagree with that particular component.
And actually, it's not so successful. It's got the same terrible relapse rates as treatment does. So it's really not so successful. It's just that it's free and more people access it.
There is that. There is that.
Yeah.
But there are a number of what I call maverick ideas, that being one of them.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how that can either ruffle feathers in the wrong way, or people can be so glad you said that.
More times than not, they're happy.
Oh my gosh, they're so happy to hear, because they're assuming that because I am Jenny and I'm an addict, that I'll always have cravings. I'll always be jealous.
Carrying the
I'll
ball and
always
chain.
envy that you can just have split that beer with your bride. Like I want to be, because that's not even in the realm of their thought process. And here we're bringing a message when we're doing recovery work, saying there's you can be free and sober. You can have deliverance. You can sit there in your family setting and watch them drinking too much and not even care. It's there's no pull. There's
Free
no
and
draw.
sober.
Can you, I know, Scott, we've talked about this, and Jenny, you may have had your own moment. I just haven't heard the story yet, right? But Scott, we talked about, and can you talk about this moment? You talked about for the first 17 years that you were in recovery, you felt like you had to be in recovery. You didn't get to be in recovery.
Yeah, I was behavior modifying, which is what's taught in the beginning phases of recovery and treatment, which is appropriate. Change your playgrounds, your playmates, your playthings, your thinking, but it's all conscious learning. You have to relearn. Like they call it rehabilitation, when really for a lot of people they have never learned how to live life, so it should be called habilitation. They're learning for the very first time how to do something. Where I felt like it was rehab for me in a sense, because I knew how to live a good life. I knew who I was, the purity of who I was, because I believed in Jesus from a very young age. I knew who I was, and so this behavior modification was such a grind. I was victimizing my recovery, like I can't drink. I wished I could, but I know myself. I'm compulsive. I'm obsessive. It's all the way or not at all. So it's it was a grind. And Jenny, she decided to work me on reading John Bevere's book, Driven by Eternity. And I just pushed it away. I did not want to read another book, because she's a reader. I'm not so much. And I knew if I read it, I'd be accountable to something that I couldn't deny or, rationalize away. And so finally I read it, and it wrecked me. And I've recommended that book to so many of people across, I've known John now for 18 years, 19 years. And I keep giving people that book, and I get calls at 2 a.m. It's like, why did you give me that book? You wrecked me. It's like, I know. Or some people, it's like, I didn't really do anything. That book didn't do much for me. It's like, well, they weren't ready. You got to be ready for that book. And it just so helped me to stop compartmentalizing first and foremost my faith, but also my recovery. And it was like, hate what God hates, love what God loves. And I applied that to my recovery. It's like, hate the drugs, hate the alcohol, don't hate me, don't hate a person, hate it, because that it is that assassin or terrorist, and love recovery because it brought me Jenny, it brought me a career, really wonderful things. And so I told myself, it's like, I'm going to tell myself every day, I hate it and I love this, hate it, love this. And for a year, I did that to myself out loud multiple times a day. And then there was this moment in time, a year down the road, where Jenny and I were in the house together. I said, Jenny, something happened to me. Like, what? It's like, I'm free and sober. I'm free for the first time. I'm no longer tethered to that. It's like, I get to be in recovery. Hallelujah. I don't have to be. I get to be.
Wow.
And it was like this, and I get chills because I've not lost that, that freedom. And I long for people to have that. I remember saying, why didn't somebody tell me this earlier? And she says, I was trying to tell you that for a year, and finally you listened to me. And so, it's such a simple, you don't need a therapist to do it. It doesn't cost any money to do it. You just got to tell yourself, so a man thinketh. So he is.
So he is.
And so that was
and there's so many people, so many of your listeners are in the spot that I was at during the 17 years that he was behavior modifying, that I was holding my breath, I was sleeping with the eyes in the back of my head open, that I was wanting his recovery for him more than he wanted it for himself. And so that was a grind. That was
and I knew it. I sensed it.
17 years. Like,
wow.
Who hangs in there for that long with something that's an irritant?
The same.
Next strip dancer.
And the girl who got married after 3 weeks to the stripper.
Right. This couple did.
Right.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's
That's because the word
so
says
powerful.
that we grow through our trials, and
Yes.
So there was enough scripture to keep me hanging on.
Yeah,
And
thank God.
but my point was that night, and oh gosh, I mean, I slept so good that night, and basically every night since, because all of a sudden that weight, because we do it intrinsically, like we just we try and fill in the gap for other people, especially people we really love, and we can carry that torch, we can have a capacity for it, and we can do it for a certain amount of time. But this whole deal, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And recovery is not a solo sport. And yet you were operating as if it were. And although my recovery was from a different issue, we literally, like if it was two foxholes on the battlefield on the front line, like taking heat from the same direction, like I needed really fancy binoculars to see Scott over there.
I'm good.
It was recovery, keeping
hip
me
to hip, side to side. I'm good.
I mean,
It's exotic.
because he was operating not only in behavior modification, but as a solo sport. He had, and he would alternate, he had his no trespassing sign and then he had his do not disturb sign. And so this is this thing that so many people can relate to this, who have a spouse where you're unequally yoked about this issue, whatever that is that the one is overboard on and the other one isn't, and you feel so helpless. And then the secular arena tells you, well, until they're ready, it won't work.
Yeah.
Right?
You're powerless.
They say if he's not ready, they say detach and let go. Well, God did not design you to detach and let go. He designed you to attach to him with a white knuckle grip. And yes, hold everything else with your other hand loosely by comparison.
Yeah.
But we're not supposed to let go of that either. And so, oh my goodness, that day, I mean, I replay it even more than the video of you dancing. I replay, I'm serious now. Now, I was making a joke, but I replay that moment every single time we teach, because we share that story, and people are like, what?
Yeah.
You can be free and sober? Like, they didn't, it's not in any curriculum.
I've never heard that before.
They're not teaching it anywhere. And that's why the passion to want to have some of these recovery principles, that's just a passionate disdain. Boy, and to me, if you took that one thing away from Scott Graham, it'd be like taking the wheel off of a car that required 4 wheels. Like we're talking.
Yeah.
I love
That's
this
powerful.
so much.
That's really.
You got anything else, man?
I'm full.
Well, here's what I want to do. First off, thank you,
Yeah.
Scott and
Thank
Jenny.
you. Appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
What I don't think really anybody knows, but Scott and Jenny have a very, very dear place in my heart.
Likewise.
And they were, when I feel like it's crazy, the Holy Spirit gave me Kingdom Empowered in this room that we're sitting and recording. And the first person I called was Scott. It's the first person I called. And it's so cool to have met you.
Yeah.
Playing golf, it's so cool to now have this relationship. And you broke down a lot of walls for me. We talked about it the other night.
Yeah. That was so cool.
And I just really appreciate that and appreciate you. And I don't know if this is okay or not, but, well, first off, if any of you guys have any needs, right? You're struggling, you have a loved one that's struggling, fine. Carefrontations, Scott and Jenny Graham, we'll have a link. We'll do all that kind of stuff. I don't know if this is okay, but I do know that on Wednesday nights on Zoom, right? They do every Wednesday night, they do a teaching on recovery for families, for people who are going through this, right? They do these teachings every single Wednesday night. And so there's not really a link to that, I don't think, but maybe we can get a link, or we'll get an email to send to where if you want to tap into that resource. Awesome. And this is so cool because there are lots of recovery programs out there. A lot of churches have recovery programs, different things, small groups, different things like that. But what's so cool about this too is there's so many people out there who have so much shame and so much guilt around maybe what they're dealing with or what their husband or wife or son or daughter is dealing with, right? And the resources out there aren't well known, right? But this is on a Zoom meeting. You don't have to have your camera on. You can just join in and you can listen in and you can learn. And it's such a powerful resource. So anybody out there who's listening to this and you've enjoyed this conversation and you need help, or you're around someone, tune into that. Reach out to them. They're amazing people.
Thank you. Yeah. No more suffering in silence.
Come on.
Yeah.
I feel like we could sit here and if we just ask them questions, like they're just going to keep dropping them, just throwing bombs.
Good one-liners.
Right.
Catchy.
Right.
Yeah.
I think,
awesome.
I think Corey typed a message onto our show notes while we were sitting here.
Yeah.
And he said, we made a drummer Matt shirt because drummer Matt is our producer. But he said, let's make a shirt, a side to side
Hip side to side
not front to
shirt.
back
There you go.
It's exotic.
Like do some like it could be like
some
a little
merch.
like
Right.
Yeah.
Hawaiian themes or
Right.
like
Oh
exotic
my
fans.
gosh.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But
I just pictured myself, my belly and everything in a G-string right now. It's like, nah, I don't know if that.
I don't
was
know
a
if we're
good
gonna put
idea.
that on a shirt.
Okay,
but-
just check.
no, no, no.
Just the words.
Just the words.
And some,
Okay.
and
Just
some
the words.
some
Let
nice
the
trees,
vision-
some flowers.
Let your own vision speak to itself.
Right, right.
That
Oh,
is
man.
so funny. That is so funny. I can't stand it.
That's a great place to end. Just right there. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
I love you guys too. Thank you.